In this video, we're going to use Python to draw points, lines, and polygons into our map. So first, let's add a city limit shapefile to give us some context of where these new polygons and lines are going to be drawn. The city limit here that I just dragged and dropped, I may make it more transparent in my symbology. So I'm going to set the opacity to about 25%. There we go. So it's not so dominant. So I dragged and dropped city limit and I made the opacity about 25%. This sets me up so that when I draw features, it's not dominated by this polygon in the background. But I wanted the city limits in the background so I can see where I am, and also to show that I'm still in this same EPSG 26910 coordinate system. First, let's draw a point. So in the Python console, I'll move this over a little bit, I'm going to open the draw point.py file found under the Python under 3 geometry handling. Let's go ahead and open that up. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. The very first thing I do is I actually draw a point using well-known text. It's very clear to see what it is because you can see that it's a point and 2 round brackets or parentheses, and then the X and the Y of the point location. Now I know these coordinates were actually drawn using UTM, so those are in meters. Now this could be a latitude longitude or longitude latitude depending, but in this case I'm using the same coordinate system that the city limits are in. Then I get the geometry of that point. I say QGIS geometry from the well-known text above, create that point. So G now becomes a geometry, a point geometry that I can use in my map. Before I go any further, I actually have to draw a layer. Now I have 2 ways of drawing this. I could put this permanently into a new layer, such as an existing shapefile or something. But in this case, I'm just going to put a layer in memory, sort of a sketch area. And to do that, I say the point layer is a new vector layer, and there's a really neat syntax for letting them know that not only is this going to be a new point layer, but I'm going to tell it what coordinate system it is with a little hashtag. The hashtag, or the question mark parameter, allows me to say that the EPSG 26910 is the coordinate reference system. So now that when I create a brand new layer, it'll know what coordinate system it's in. I'm going to call it point layer. And the third item here says memory. So this is in the memory of my current session. That means when I close, it'll be gone. It's a temporary layer that I'm creating. This is just for creating a new layer for like a scratch pad that I can use. The next thing I do is create a data provider. So PR, provider. Once I have the data provider, I can add things to it like geometries and columns and that sort of thing. Now I'm not adding any columns. I'm not creating any IDs or other types of columns. I can do that at this point, but I'm only interested in the geometry. So I'm going to say the feature or feat is a QGIS feature, and then I'm going to add a geometry to that feature. So I'm creating a feature that goes on that point layer, and I'm going to set the geometry to G. That's up there. So I'm going to say create a new feature, a QGIS feature, and set the geometry to G. So now I have this feature. It's not on the layer yet, but I have a feature. But then I could say, okay, take the data provider and add that feature to it. Just be very careful here. When you add the features, it's a list. So you have to put them in square brackets. So if you were to put feet in there, without the square brackets, you'd get an error. So we're going to say to the data provider, add the feature. And then we say the point layer, update the extent, so it refreshes everything. And then we add to the current project that layer called point layer. So let's run this and see how this all works. So we hit run script, and sure enough, there's our new point layer. Now that's a temporary layer, and it has no data. So for example, if I pick on it and try to identify features for that, you'll see there's no data in the identify results because I didn't add any. It's just a geometry. Now, if I wanted to run this again, what I could do is I could change the location. For example, maybe I want to put this a little bit higher, maybe up to 90. So put it quite a few meters above it. And I run this again. What will happen is that it'll create a whole other point layer and put the location quite a few meters above. Let's do it a third time. This time I'll make it quite a bit. I'll make it, let's say 990, and then run it again. I'll get a third layer drawn, and I'll get a third point drawn even higher up. So each time I do that. So I could have code in there to check to make sure that there's not an existing point layer and remove it. But right now this code gets the point in well-known text, creates a geometry, it gets the point layer, creates a data provider, takes the feature, sets the geometry, adds the features to the provider, and then updates the extent and adds that to the layer. So it's a very powerful way of adding points to your map. Let's start a brand new project. Yes, and we'll discard this. Close that Python. So let's start again. We'll add the city limit again for context. Again, hit OK for UTM. It's still quite bright. So I'm just going to, again, tweak the opacity down to about 25. There we go. That's fine. And this time we're going to open another Python file and we're going to add drawLine.py. Now this is almost identical to the add the point, but this time the well-known text shows a line string. So we've got X and Y and then the end X and Y. So it's a straight line. And then we get the geometry. We create a line layer. This time it's a line string, not a point. Now that line string, you notice the type of layer it is, line string, matches the exact wording of the well-known text. Again, I'm using these parameters saying what coordinate system it's in. It's going to create a temporary layer called line layer in memory. I get the data provider. I add a new feature. I set the geometry to that feature. I add that feature to the data provider. And then I update the line layer extents. And then I add that line layer to the instance. Let's run that and see what that looks like. And sure enough, there's the line layer. I'm not going to clear out this time. I'm going to open up the draw polygon directly now, Python. So let's look at that. And again, this is almost identical to the last two you saw, except we're using the well-known text as a polygon and the type of layer it is a polygon. You saw before that the well-known text was a line string and the vector layer was a line string, whereas this polygon, the only difference is we have a polygon well-known text and polygon vector layer. Again, the EPSG is still 26910. The one thing about well-known text with polygons, you'll notice, the polygons always have two parentheses at the beginning and ending of the polygon. So if you look at the very end, there's two as well. Whereas point and lines only have one. It's an interesting thing to note. Okay, so we're going to put this on the polygon layer in memory again. Again, we get the polygon data provider. We create the feature. We set the geometry of the feature. We add features to the data provider. Remember, square brackets. We update the extents, and then we add the polygon layer. Let's run that now. There we are. So now you can see we've got the polyline layer, the polygon layer. In fact, just for fun, I'm going to open up the draw point again. There it is, and run that as well. And there's the point. So now you can see I've got a point layer, a polygon layer, and a line layer, all using Python. Almost identical techniques. The only difference is I'm just changing the well-known text and the different types of temporary layers.